Ginny, Ruth, Michael, thank you so much for joining. Kim Griggs, thank you. There's a few new people I haven't seen before. Thanks for the love hearts. Love the love hearts. Always. But good evening from South Carolina, Joe. Thanks, Marnie. Love South Carolina. Never been there myself, but I heard it's amazing. It's an amazing place. Um, I think it's a pretty red state, I think, a little bit, but but yeah, it's still a great place. I'd love to visit South Carolina one day. I'd actually like to visit a lot of the red states. Santa is watching. Yeah, you can see Santa Claus there. So try and be nice. Otherwise, Santa's here just to make sure that everybody's nice to me. And if you're not, you don't get any presents. So yeah, and that is actually Australia Santa, the real Australian Santa there. Yeah. Um, I thought I'd just quickly start with, I don't know if you guys have been on Twitter at all before I move on to the more important stuff, but there's currently this thing going on where um, Elon Musk has basically now made it I didn't know this was a thing before though, but on Twitter, um, there's a location setting, and mine has always said Australia, so people know that I'm from Australia. But apparently, I live in Charleston, so it's only blue spot in South Carolina. Very few are gotcha. Yeah, I guess it's like Texas, where Austin is also like a blue state, like a blue city within a red state. Um, so yeah, so basically on Twitter, um, I didn't know that there's a location thing on your profile, and up until a few days ago, it wasn't mandatory to put it on. So you could have said, like, you could have pretended to be like an American account talking about, like, Donald Trump or whatever. And there were some accounts on there. So a couple of days ago, Elon Musk made it mandatory. So now everyone's location is automatically put onto your Twitter account. Now, for me, it doesn't make any difference because I was always shown as Australian. But what they've noticed now is a lot of the people who were making comments, especially a lot of the MAGA accounts, where they were like, their MAGA accounts would be like Texas, like, so they'd be specifically about a city. And then we found out with this new mandatory thing on Twitter is they're actually the accounts are coming from Russia or Serbia or India or all these other countries, right? And they're not even American accounts. Now, so it was quite weird seeing all these accounts that I had interacted with on Twitter. And in fact, because I'm very open about being Australian, it showed on my account. I would often say that I'm Australian. So I wasn't trying to hide. Like, obviously you can hear my accent on Substack. I've never tried to pretend like I'm an American. I wonder if they're being paid. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got to wonder if they're being paid. I mean, it's one thing. I mean, there's been a little bit of also, it's like, I've always had this thing for me is, you're Australian, mind your own business. I've always had that. But that also shows that that also shows that I've always been transparent about that I'm not in America, right? So you wouldn't say that if I was pretending to be American. Now, on Substack Live, obviously, I talk with an Australian accent. I talk about being Australian on my notes. I talk about that on Twitter as well. So I've never tried to hide it. I bet they are. Yeah, but like I could have because on even on Substack Live, I have a very very good American accent, a very good, and so I could have been doing Substack Live videos with an American accent, and you guys would never have known because it's that good, and I know that because my mum, when I first did an American accent, when I was like, I don't know, like 14, she said it was the best American accent she's ever heard. So that's coming from my mum. So my mum wouldn't be biased. I know about that. So I know for a fact that I could, but I didn't do that because I wanted to be honest about being Australian. So yeah, so I, I just found it quite interesting that all these accounts that look like MAGA, and the thing is, like, if you look at my account, my account just says it's a Carl Sagan comment that says it pays to keep an open mind, but not so open. So it's got nothing to do with politics. So my account isn't like I'm a Democrat or I hate this. It's a neutral account. I've heard your American accent impression, Joe. It's good. Yeah. I don't know. I'm only joking. I don't know if I could do it for like an hour and a half though. Like I've only done it for like okay, I will do a quick I will do a quick an American accent. Now keep in mind, it would be much harder to do it for like if you're doing like a Substack live for an hour and you gotta do an accent, that's pretty hard, right? But I will do just a couple of lines to prove to you how easy it would have been for me to pretend to be American and probably got a lot more followers if I was American, right? So let me just go. Hi, my name is Joe Thomas here, and I'm calling. My Substack live is from Los Angeles, California. As you know, as you can tell, I am an American. I've always been an American. My parents are American. My grandparents are from the United States of America. I have American flags. I'm a very patriotic United States American. And if anybody out there ever says that I am not American, I just want to say those people are traitors. They are absolute traitors against the American people. So that's my Australian accent, American accent. You can tell it's pretty amazing. Um, yeah, so that's so good. Really, Kimmy? I'm actually joking. I'm assuming it's really bad. I think it's really bad. But what does it sound like though? Does it sound like what does it sound like I'm from? Because I can't do like you've been working on it, Sandra. Has it was it that bad before, Sandra? Yeah. Hi, Joyce. Nice to see you, Joyce. Nice to see you again. So just give me some feedback. I know it's not a very good accent, but just give me some feedback of where do I sound like I'm from Los Angeles, New York, like the South? Like where does it sound like? I'd love to know where it sounds like. Because in Australia, I think a lot of the accents that like wherever you Texas, really? Wow. So it's a southern accent. Wow, okay. So if I'm gonna pretend to be I actually think you sound southern. Really? Okay. You sound like a southerner. Wow. Okay. So maybe, yeah, that's interesting. You sound more southern. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think you know what? I think you're right. I think, you know what I think it is? I think it's the hillbilly. Wow, Kim. Wow, that's enough. Come on. Do I really sound hillbilly? Really? Oh wow. Okay. I thought I was sounding like someone from New York or Los Angeles. So, but the whole, you know what I think it is? I think it's the like, yes, ma'am, yes, sir, big bop, like that. I don't know why, but it just seems easier for me to talk like that. I love it, but I much prefer an Aussie accent much more than any of our old American accents. Yes, you're trying too hard. Oh, gotcha. Bob. Thanks, Bob. Thanks for joining. Thanks. Yeah, okay. I'm trying too hard. Okay. I think you're right. I think if I was going to do like an American accent for a year and for like an hour and a half, I'm an actual Southerner too. Oh, Marnie, really? So I sound like someone. So Marnie, if I was like in where you are and I bumped into you at the shops, at the store, and I just said, "Hey, Marnie, hi, hi, Bob. Yeah, I'll do the American accent one more time for Bob, and then I'll move on." But imagine I could never do a proper Australian. Australian accents is one of the worst, hardest accents to do. So I, I've never heard an American do a really good one. Props for trying. So, yeah. Well, I will say, okay, let me give you this. I'll do one more accent for Bob because I think it's important. Bob hears this. I'm in the South, right? I'm in the South of I'm in Charleston, South Carolina. I'm in South Carolina and I'm in Charleston. I've walked into a shop and Marnie is there. And I've walked up to Marnie in the shop and it's my first time there. But I am from the South and I walk up to Marnie and I just say, look, where are the carrots? So here we go. So, hi, how you going? My name's Joe, and I'm new to Charlottesville, South Carolina, and it's my first time attending this shop here. And it's a beautiful shop. I love this shop. It's one of the best shops I've ever attended, and I just wanted to know where the carrots are. Now, I have looked and navigated through this shop a couple of times, and I did find some other fruit, but I can't find the carrots. Marnie, can you help me navigate myself to the carrots, please? So that would be how I would talk normally in America. It sounded a bit formal. I think it did sound a bit too formal. Definitely Southern hillbilly, right? So, wow. Okay. Oh, Bob, thanks. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So basically, if I was in America, I'd be like a hillbilly Southerner. Okay. That's good to know. That's good to know. No one says I'm attending or navigating. Really? That's not how people talk in Southern. Really? I love it. A Texan. Yeah. Yeah. I was just trying to be formal. I thought because sometimes I hear that sometimes in the South, some of the gentlemen can try to be like very formal. And so, hi, Dave from California. Good to see you. So I was just trying to do that like formal, Southern old school accent. But anyway, forget about it. Maybe I couldn't pretend to be an American. Um, Hicks aren't formal. Gotcha. Okay. All right. I'll work on that, Kim. I'm sorry. Okay. But just so you know, Kim, my mum did say I did a very good American accent. So I think I'll take her word first. So great, Charlestonians don't have an accent, but outside Charleston does. I'm originally from North Carolina, but lived in Texas. Once I think you were there from somewhere, Texas. Oh, right. And my word, yeah. Back at you, Joe. I'm okay. And interesting. Yeah. But yeah, I was just basically saying to the other people who've just going that there's been a lot of stuff in online in the media about overseas people commenting on American politics. Just tell them you're from San Sabs, Saba, Texas. Okay, I will do that. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I have a feeling it might be a bad thing, but I'll do it. But yeah, a lot of comments online about people from overseas commenting on American politics. It's something that I've always copped some criticism for, but I think a lot of the criticism is a lot of these people are pretending to be American and like their accounts look like they're from America and they're commenting like they are American, but they're actually from India, Russia, Serbia. Like it just doesn't make any sense, right? So, but yeah, so I think it is different, and I don't think there's anything wrong. Definitely bad, but your accents will sound accurate. Definitely bad. Yeah, okay, cool. So I could get away with it. Interesting. Um, so yeah, I think it's interesting because I think this sort of thing, like I've personally I've stayed off Twitter for a couple of days because I'm worried if I go on Twitter now, everyone's going to go, you're Australian. But, even though I'm always never pretended not to be Australian. But I think before I move on to Mandami and Trump meeting, I just want to say that, like, I think it's perfectly normal. I think it's perfectly okay for other countries to comment on American politics or other people, and I'll explain why. Because, and I wrote about this is because, like, America, it's not like over, people from my country or the UK or whatever talk about American politics, right? Just because it's like some niche thing. The United States is the most powerful country on the planet, right? Um, it has the most powerful military. It affects every country militarily. Donald Trump put tariffs on Australia, Europe. It affects everybody. It doesn't just affect Americans. When Trump talks about invading Greenland, annexing Canada, going after Venezuela, I mean, this has impacts on the rest of the world. Like the idea that we're not allowed to comment on that or mind your own business. Well, what America does impacts a lot of other countries. Um, and secondly, I don't think a lot of people in America who don't like Donald Trump really, they actually like people like me commenting on American politics because they can see that people from overseas also support them as well. And I think they like to have that support from other people who are like minded that like to them, who support them and who also dislike Donald Trump. So I think it's actually a positive. If I was in America and I was a progressive or a centre left, in the Democratic Party, I would love to know that people in Europe, Australia, New Zealand were supporting me and also, thanks, Bob, and also dislike Trump as well because, it just impacts so many people around the world. So I think it's actually a positive. I think it is a negative when people pretend to be American or pretend to have accounts that look like they're MAGA accounts, and you know, and on there, like as I said before, there was one called Texas First, and the guy is living in Russia. Like, why would you call? I wouldn't call myself Texas, like LA First, if I was living there. Alfred, I appreciate it. It's good to have an objective perspective. Thanks, Alfred. Kimmy, I agree, Marnie. I'm originally from Texas, and agree, Joe sounds like a Texan. Yeah, thanks. It gives validity to what we are thinking. Exactly, old soul. Marnie, I'd rather listen to your take on America than most Americans. Yeah, exactly. Look, in this day and age where everybody's on the internet, it's amazing that, like, I think people don't realize is that I think people in the UK, Scotland, Australia, New Zealand, America, Canada, we're all absorbing very similar news, right? Because most people in Australia don't go home and watch 6 o'clock news like they did, like we used to, and like America used to, or like they used. We're all watching news online, and news online is not generally local; it's world news. So in a way, we're absorbing the same sort of news. And the news that makes the most, because Australian politics is very boring compared to American politics, right? And I would say that would be the same for most Western countries. I think Canadian politics would be more boring than American politics. So, of course, if you're online, you're going to be getting more news coming from America because it's so much crazy stuff, right? And the other thing I would say is, in defense of people like talking about American politics a lot, is that you have so much besides the nefarious thing of having Trump as the number one like this, as the most powerful person on the planet, is that you have such crazy things that go on there that how are we supposed to like keep our eyes away, right? Like, do you remember when Trump and RFK Jr. were talking about how Tylenol causes autism, and then Trump says there's no there's no autism in Cuba, right? Because they don't have Tylenol, right? Like, how are we supposed to pretend like that's not happening and not like we're not watching that? It's like you can't say to us, mind your own business and do that crazy stuff in front of our eyes, right? It's like it's like a train wreck. It's like someone walking down the street naked and in the middle of the city, and then people going like, "Why are you looking? Like that's weird. Stop looking at that naked person." Like it's like, don't do crazy things like that and expect the rest of the world not to go, "Okay, what's happening there?" And like you've got, it's like so many nutty things. Of course, the rest of the world is going to be interested in it. Like we can't turn out because we look at our own politics, which is like mundane. Which, and by the way, I love my politics. Um, Hi, greetings from Gambia in the West Africa. Oh, wow, great to see you. Good to see you. Someone from Gambia. Cool. Um, and a lot of people, yeah. So I think it's perfectly natural from people from the patients are running this on. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. There is, it's hard for us not to look away, right? And also because it's not like, because the news is so online, that's the news that you get. Even if you don't want to get that news, that's the news that you get on TikTok, on streaming server, on your news feed. That's the number one news. Like when Trump berates Zelensky, right, in the Oval Office, that was news. That was like the number one news in Australia. So it's not like we're going looking for American news and suddenly we're like we're trying to investigate. Oh, I don't want to watch this. That's the number one news here. So um, America is a mere soap opera with a second. Yeah, it is. And it has, like, this is the funniest part to me, right? You've got RFK Jr., thank you. It's a wonderful pleasure to be here. God bless you. God bless you too. God bless you too. Um, it's the crazy thing is the Trump has basically turned the Trump administration into like a reality TV show. You've got Dr. Oz, right, who's like the chief doctor guy, like he talks, he's like a TV doctor. You had Dr. Phil, who I used to watch back in the 90s it'd be Oprah, and then afterwards you would have Dr. Phil giving you hard, like real, like therapy. It was like tough therapy, tough love, right? And now he's going around with ice, right? Dr. Phil is going around with ice, talking to migrants, and then saying that you're doing the wrong thing. Like this is not normal stuff. Like, don't tell us not to look at American politics when you have Dr. Phil walking around with ice. David, media circus Trump sells because, yeah, government God is in the no longer, yeah. Yeah. So it is. It's just like this crazy stuff. It's terrible how we get here so fast. Our president actually thinks he has TV rating. Yeah, exactly. And like this even goes towards this like circus show, how Trump runs the administration. He surrounds himself. I used to watch him too, Joe. I can't believe that he's turned his yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm starting to wonder, Bob, I'm starting to wonder what the hell we're all going to talk about when he have a normal president. Yeah, exactly. You know, Bob, that's funny you said that because I was saying to someone the other day, like, without Trump in the news doing crazy stuff, could you imagine if it was just a normal person, like, I don't know, an establishment Republican? But you know what, Bob? I think it would actually be so much more healthy because I think one of the things, hi Tamara, good to see you, Tamara. Thanks for joining. Thank you. One of the things I did when Trump won the 2024 election, and because I couldn't believe, I mean, I could believe he won. I wasn't, to be honest, I was 50-50 that I thought he was going to win. But when he did win, I was just so despondent by it that I actually, for about a month, I stopped looking at politics straight after the election. I just went, you know what? What's the point? You know, he got elected. He did all these crazy stuff, right? And he still got elected. And so I think a lot of people, maybe people on here as well, right? We invested a lot of emotional thing into Kamala Harris winning, and it was like a 24/7 thing, right? And then suddenly she loses. It's like so many people I know in America went like, I'm out. I'm out. I don't want to, there's no point. He's won now. What and they tuned out. And I totally get that, right? And I did it for about a month. And I've got to say, yeah, cry, yeah. I was pretty happy for that month. Now, it's different for me because I live in Australia. So I can tune out in a way that you guys can't because you're living there. So it was easy for me to go, you know what? I was completely devastated both times. Yeah, exactly, Sandra. The ostrich head in the Sandism that swept the Liberal community after set us back a little bit, perhaps psychologically necessary, but also unfortunately resulting in a bit of a letting one's guard down by not paying attention. Yeah, that's true, money. I cried and tried to pretend for a few weeks. It didn't happen. Yeah, I think a lot of people were in shock when Trump won the second time. I mean, the first time I didn't see it coming. The second time I knew. Yeah, I agree, Sandra. The first time, the polling was so much in Hillary Clinton's favor that it was understandable. And by the way, and he lost the popular vote. But the second time, to be honest with you, I thought the vibes and the momentum was behind Trump for most of the time. And when he was doing all this crazy stuff, like he was showing up in court because of the documents case, and then what I would notice is that the next polls that came up slowly showed him moving up. So it was always 50-50, around 50-50. And we all know that generally polling will underestimate him. So why I thought he might win is I was thinking if it's 50-50 and people underestimate him in terms of polling, he has a chance of winning this. So I definitely think the complacency of 2016 wasn't there in 2024. God bless you, Joe. Thank you. I think, it wasn't there in 2024. I think people were more realistic and we saw a lot of I personally was hoping for dear God that he was going to win. There was that guy, what's his name? That I can't remember his name. He Alan Lichtman. Alan Lichtman, I think he is. And I saw it coming, not bragging, I panicked. His fake fucking assassinations. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was a combination. I think the biggest factor was inflation because, as an Australian and someone who follows overseas politics, not just American, you guys would know this. There's never been a year like 2024 where incumbent governments got kicked out, and so for had Kamala won, she would have been going against the grain in terms of the trend that was happening in 2024. So she was always going to be behind it. But when you add to that Joe Biden leaving so late, no primaries, the assassination attempt, when you put it all together, thirdly, less people pay attention to politics these days. They don't pay attention to politics. The way a lot of people vote these days is not based on who they're following. It's based on their everyday lived experience. So if your rent's going up, your you can't buy a home. That's how you base who you vote on, not what someone is saying. Didn't forget to blame inflation on COVID, or he didn't blame it. In fact, didn't Biden? Biden forgot to blame inflation on COVID. Yeah, I know. The thing is, David, I think the problem is what we're seeing with Trump at the moment is like with inflation. Out of any Western country, even though incumbent governments were getting kicked out at record rates because of post-COVID inflation, right, David, is that what we saw around the world is it didn't matter whether you're left-wing or right-wing or libertarian, you're getting kicked out. And everyone was getting blamed because you were in power. That was it. Just because you're in power, we're blaming you. And in the old days, right, obviously the economy, in the old days, people would be watching more of, for example, Biden had a good story to tell. In fact, Biden had a better story to tell than centre left in Australia or Europe, because under Biden, Biden kept inflation lower than any other country in the Western planet by a big mile. You did the best by a mile. The problem with that is that it's a very hard argument to sell, because if you can't afford the rent, and you can't afford to buy a home, and everything is going up, telling people that you have it better than Europe and Australia is not going to help you, right? So I think it was always a hard argument to sell, because people don't want to know that you've done better than other countries. They just want the prices to go down. That's all they care about, right? And I'm not talking about people, Tamara, yes, people look at their own experience, but it doesn't reconcile how MAGA experience inflation, but only connect to Trump. Yeah, exactly. And that's what we're seeing. And Tamara, that's what we're seeing at the moment with Trump. Trump is trying to be 2024 Trump. And Trump can't be 2024 Trump because he's now the incumbent. And that's a big problem for him, right? When you're the incumbent, you get blamed. The reason Trump is trying to say, last year, Joe Biden tried to tell people that the economy was doing well. When I heard him saying that, I thought that was the worst thing he could have done, right? Because you can't tell people the economy is doing well, right? If a lot of people are suffering and house prices are like doubling and rents are going up, you can't do that. Now, Trump has taken that and put that on steroids. He's going, at least with Biden, there was a bit of nuance about their argument, right? There was a little bit of nuance about it. With Trump, there's no nuance. Trump is going around saying this is the best economy that has ever existed. He thinks he can lie his way out of this, but you can't lie your way out of something that everybody is experiencing every day. If Trump says the economy's never been better and your rent is going up, it doesn't matter what Trump says. You can't lie. Now, you can lie yourself out of a lot of things. Like he lied himself out of January 6th, right? Maybe you can lie yourself out of, the culture wars, or you can lie yourself out of the documents case, the whole documents case. You can lie yourself out of a lot of things, but you can't lie yourself out of what people are experiencing like 100 times a day, every day. Trump, I think, knows that. Which brings me to Zoran Mamdani and the Trump meeting in the Oval Office. Speaking of reasons why people overseas can't keep their eyes off American politics, this was one of the big ones, right? This is why it's so surreal for overseas people to watch this. You had Trump for months saying that Zoran Mamdani was a communist who was going to destroy America. who he wanted to like deport out of the country because he wasn't, because he lied on his citizenship. He did the whole Barack Obama thing. Um, so he did all the usual like things, right? He said he wasn't going to fund. He said, now imagine this. This is incredible, right? Think about this. He said to the people in New York, if you vote for Zora Mandami, I'm going to pull the. He said the day after the meeting. Yeah, that's right. I'm going to pull the funding out of New York. Could you imagine? Now, I know what I'm saying now is not even a big deal. It's not even a big deal that Trump said, I'm going to pull the funding unless you vote for the person I want you to vote for. Unless you vote for Andrew Cuomo, I'm going to pull the funding. Think about what he's doing there. That's like he's basically blackmailing the people of New York. Now, I'm saying this as something that's not even really a big deal because in the United States of America in 2025, Donald Trump doing that was like number 100 on the worst things that he's done. It's not even considered a big thing. Now, if Joe Biden had said, if someone like Barack Obama had said, well, I'm not, and let's say Rudy Giuliani, right, wants to become the mayor of New York, right? And Rudy Giuliani is up against someone else, right? And Barack Obama says, you know what? If you vote for Rudy Giuliani in New York, you're not going to get any of the funding from America. Now, this wouldn't have been news that happened for one day. We would still be talking about it today. They would still be talking about this today on Fox News. Do you remember that time that Barack Obama wanted to pull funding unless you didn't vote for Rudy Giuliani? That would have been like the biggest news for like a million years. But because Trump does so many crazy things all the time, it barely made the news. So now we've got Zora Mandami, who was the worst person on the planet, standing next to Trump while Trump is like sitting down, right, looking at him with like, like love hearts in his eyes and like, just like, looking at Zoran, like it's almost like he had like a man crush on him. Yeah, Zoran's a pretty charismatic guy. He's good looking. He's well spoken. He's got good fashion sense. He's got it. I agree. He has it. Like if I met Zora Mandami, I'd have, I'm straight, but I'd have a man crush on him. I'd have a massive man crush on this guy. He's got a lot going for it. So, so I totally understand why, Trump was like, and then the funniest thing was the next day, Trump shows up with like, a scarf. No, sorry, it was like a turtleneck and he's got this whole like suit on, like a Zora Mandami suit. And then, so what did you make of that? Yeah. So basically, I think the reason why Trump acted the way with Zora Mandami is a couple of things. One is Trump loves a winner, right? Trump is not an ideologue. As much as Trump likes to make everything about left wing, right wing, radical, right, like that, he's not an ideologue. He's about winning. And what this is what we do know. We do know that it was leaked out of the Trump administration that behind the scenes, Donald Trump was saying, right, that he was very impressed about how Zora Mandami was running his campaign. He said, this is what was leaked out of the Trump. He said he spoke very well, he was very charismatic, and so he basically, right, so I think he saw himself in Zora Mandami. He saw himself. Think about this, right? Think about the connections between Zoran. Now, I know Zoran is not Trump. I'm not saying that. But I'm talking purely in strategy and marketing and politically. I'm not talking about policy or anything like that. If you look at Zora Mandami, how he ran his election, and you look at Trump, how he ran his election, there are similarities. I'm talking about 2016. Trump in 2016, right, was going after fellow Republicans, right? He was going after fellow Republicans and calling them neocons and they were warmongers and all this sort of stuff, right? And he was like, I'm America first. I only care about what happens in this country. I don't care about what happens. I don't want to go into Iraq. So he was all about, it's about here, right? He was also the outsider. So he went after his own people, the establishment. and then he went after the Democrats. What did Zoran Mandami do? He was up against Andrew Cuomo, a Democrat who is an establishment Democrat. He went after Andrew Cuomo in the same way that Donald Trump went after his own Republicans. He attacked them. When there was that time where they asked a whole bunch of candidates during the primaries, would you go to Israel? Right? Would you go to Israel to to introduce yourself to Israel and stuff like that? Everyone said yes, I would go to Israel. And Zoran Mandami said no, I would stay here in New York and look after the people here, including my Jewish brothers and sisters. Right? So he didn't say anything anti-Semitic. He didn't say he was going to go to Israel. He was very careful about what he worded it. But in a way, he's saying New York's, sorry, in a way, he's saying New York first, the same way that Trump was saying America first, right? He was saying, I'm going to put New York first, but if you want to go overseas, you knock yourself out, but I'm looking after Americans, whether they're Muslim, Jewish, Hindu, whatever. That was a big moment, right? Because here's the other thing that similarities. In 2016, when Trump was debating Hillary Clinton, he brought I don't know if you remember this, he brought a whole bunch of women who accused Bill Clinton, right, Hillary Clinton's husband, of sexual assault. And he brought these women to the debate, right? So you have all these women who accused, Bill Clinton of sexual harassment, right? That was like it was like a big stunt that he did, right? What did Zoran Mandami do with Andrew Cuomo? He brought a woman who accused Andrew Cuomo of sexual harassment, right? And brought her to the debate and then talked about her during the debate and said, there is a woman in the crowd that accused you of sexual assault, and you put an NDA against her so she can't speak out. So think about how he ran a Donald Trump style campaign. And I guarantee you that Donald Trump would have been watching all this and seeing some of the similarities between how he ran and how Mandami ran. The other thing that he did, which I think was not necessarily Trump-like, but was different to what you see these days, is that the reason that he started getting a lot of attention, right, is that Mandami did a TikTok video or a video where he went from one side of New York, or I think it was the Bronx, from one side to the other, and he went into one of the most Donald Trump areas. So Trump has something to gain in Durham. Yeah. So I think that was Zoran. Yeah. So I think that video, I'll get to that in a sec. Yeah. I think in that video, he showed that he went directly to speak to Trump supporters, right? He went to speak to Trump supporters and he asked them why they voted for Trump. He didn't tell them off. He didn't yell at them. He said, why'd you vote for Trump? And they said, cost of living. And they all said cost of living, right? And so this is where I think it ties into why Trump is partly because he looks up to, he sees himself in Zoran Mandami, not in terms of policy, but in terms of how good he is at campaigning, because Trump is a very good campaigner when he's the opposition. He's very bad when he's in power. So I think Trump is the best opposition campaigner and the worst incumbent campaigner, which is a weird thing. So I think that Trump was also being nice to Zoran Mandami. I don't know how many people watched the whole thing, but one of the things that illuminated to me why Trump was being so nice to him is that out of the blue, Trump said, Bernie Sanders was a lot of the people who voted for Bernie Sanders actually voted for me, right? Now, a lot of the people, now think about this, some of the people who voted, about 10% of the people who voted for Zoran Mandami had previously voted for Donald Trump. And Donald Trump brought that up in when he was talking to Zoran Mandami. Trump can see that Trump sees Zoran Mandami as a Bernie Sanders type person. And there is this thing where some people will go from the far left to the far right, right? It's a populist thing. And Trump wants to be seen as the populist. Zohra Mamdani is seen as the populist, and that's why Trump has always said two things about Bernie Sanders. On the one hand, he would call him crazy Bernie Sanders, but on the other hand, he would praise him and he would say that Bernie Sanders has been treated very unfairly by the Democrats. And he does that because he wants to bring some of those people across, attaching himself to winners, what Trump does. Yeah, attaching himself to winners, but attaching yourself not just to any winner, a winner who has support of anti-establishment people, right? Outsiders, right? And Zohra Mamdani is considered the outsider. He's the guy who talks about cost of living all the time. Trump wants to be that person again. Trump in 2016 was the outsider. Trump is no longer seen as the outsider, right? So so if you look at the election in New York, what happened is that Trump attached himself to Andrew Cuomo, the establishment candidate, right? So now you have Zohran Mamdani, who's the outsider, the anti-establishment person, right? Now he's up against Andrew Cuomo, the insider, and also Donald Trump, the insider. So the more they attacked Zohran Mamdani, the more popular he became. The more Trump was attacked, the more popular Trump became. It's this crazy world that we live in at the moment, especially it happens around the world, but especially in America, where being the incumbent is toxic and being the outsider is considered the best thing you can do, right? It's the best possible position. So I think Trump was attaching himself to Zohran Mamdani because he thinks he's a winner, one thing, but also he sees Zohran Mamdani as someone, so end game. Well, I think the end game, Tamara, is to basically grab some of Zohran Mamdani's followers to attach himself to in the same way that Bernie Sanders. So when Bernie Sanders, now remember this, Zohran Mamdani can't become president because he's born in America, right? But when Bernie Sanders was kicked out, when he never made it past the primary, about 10% of those voters voted for Trump, right? So I think Trump wants to grab a lot of those anti-establishment voters and bring them back into the Republican Party, right? He wants to bring them back in as populists, right? The same people who voted for Zohran Mamdani, but voted for the same people who voted for Trump in 2024, but then flipped and voted for Zohran Mamdani. He wants to bring those people back. And by the way, they are gettable. You could, because they're not voting. They're not voting on Trump being authoritarian. They're not voting on Trump being found liable of sexual assault. Unfortunately, that stuff doesn't really matter. The thing that matters in American politics is cost of living. That's the thing that's going to get you kicked out or brought you in. And I think Trump I think Trump sees Zohran Mamdani as a vehicle to trying to get back that being the cost of living president, right? He's okay. So I think that's the end game. I think, I don't think it's going to work, right? I don't think it's going to work. But Trump is desperate to stop being seen. Trump got, like, during the shutdown, Trump lost. Let me say this. Let me preface this is I think Trump winning 2024 was awful. Like, I think it's one of the worst things that could have happened, not just as an American, but as an Australian and a European. But if there's any positives in Trump winning, and there's not many, is that by Trump winning, he essentially killed MAGA, right? And what I mean by that is, had Trump just lost against Kamala Harris by maybe a small percentage, Kamala Harris would still have faced inflation. Inflation would not have gone away. Inflation is not just because of tariffs. It makes it worse. The stuff with housing and stuff, that is going to take decades to fix. So who's ever in power was going to face inflation. So right now, had Kamala won, she would be facing criticisms over inflation. There's no doubt about that. So by Trump winning and lying to everyone, remember Trump was going around saying I'm going to bring inflation down. I'm going to end the wars. I'm going to release the Epstein files. By Trump winning, America got to see his lies unravel in front of their eyes live, right? They got to see everything that he did become a lie. Had he lost, none of that would have been unraveled. That mystery or that MAGA cult would have still existed because we wouldn't have seen because he lost, they could always say, well, had he won, he could have done all these things. He could have released the Epstein files. He could have ended the wars, but since we'll never know because he lost. So I think by him winning, he's essentially killed MAGA from being a big force, right? Again, I don't think it's a good thing that he won, but I think it's the only positive thing is that a lot of independents, except she wouldn't have done these ridiculous tariffs. Yeah, I agree, Marnie. I definitely think it would have been less. I never thought about that. Interesting. Yeah, I, 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 I'm not saying that it would have. I think it would have been less, but it still would have been high, because a lot of the stuff that people were worried about is things like rents and so Trump pulled back the curtain on exactly, Tamara. Yeah, we got to see Trump. I mean, it's in a sense, it's like, we everyone got to see like in 2016 to 2020, Trump to some degree, he said a lot of crazy stuff. He did some crazy stuff, but to some degree was like more of an establishment Republican, except for his persona, right? But this time, and then a lot of people on the right would say, look, it's all mean tweets. He doesn't really do a lot of that stuff, right? But the reason he wasn't doing a lot of that stuff is because he was surrounded by establishment Republicans who didn't allow him to do that stuff, right? It wasn't because he didn't want to do it. So in a sense, Democrats got seen as overreacting, right? But then January 6th happened and we saw the real Donald Trump. But that happened after the election, right? Or, So, and then we got 4 years and I've seen now we should impeach him. Yeah, exactly. So this is what this is why I think MAGA is dead. I think there'll always be MAGA, but I don't think there's enough MAGA now. He's lost the enthusiasm, right? Last year he had the vibes. He had all the podcasters, right? He had Joe Rogan. He had all these people who were like supporting him. They're all gone now, right? Now it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to become Democrats, right? But you don't have to. These people don't have to become Democrats for them to be favorable to Trump. Because if people don't go out, if people think, you know what, if the same people who voted for Trump come out and go, well, you know what, I don't like Trump anymore, but I still hate the Democrats, I'm just not going to vote. That helps the Democrats because there's less people voting for him, right? So, so even if they don't become Democrats, right? And also on top of that, the podcasters and the online, they created this big vibe, right? They created this like really enthusiasm that everyone was behind Trump. You had Elon coming out and going, you know what, I'm endorsing him. Then Joe Rogan and this person, all these people who weren't necessarily MAGA before, and he had this momentum behind him, right? You could feel it. If you're honest on the left, you could see what was happening. You could see it, right? You could see something was going on last year. And so now, if you're on the right and you can't see that the opposite is happening, then you're also not listening to reality. So I think one of the things that worries me is that the establishment Democrats, and look, let me just say this, I'm not a democratic socialist. I'm a social democrat, right? So I'm not a socialist. So a lot of the policies that Zoran Mandami believes, I'm not sure that they would work, but first of all, let me say this. He's nowhere near as radical as people make him out to be. A lot of his policies would be kind of normal in my country or Europe and stuff like that. He's not talking about, seizing the means of production or anything like that. So I think he's, but again, I'm not a democratic socialist. I'm a social democrat, right? So I'm my politics is similar to Australia, European, Scandinavian, right? So we're not socialists. We believe in capitalism, but we believe capitalism left unfettered is unfair. So we believe in capitalism, but you have to have like a nanny state to make sure that people don't fall below. That's what I believe in, right? I believe in a mixed economy, right? I believe capitalism does things really well, like cars, making computers, all that sort of stuff. I think that does really well. But I think government does better things with healthcare, infrastructure like that. So I think you got to have a mixed economy, taxes for the people. Yeah. So I think, I think from that point of view, that worries me about the establishment. And again, I'm not saying this as like a far left person, is that the Democratic Party, the establishment, doesn't really understand, is very bad at marketing and is very bad at things like like a couple of hours or just before Zoran Mandami was about to meet Trump, right? Um, the Republicans, I believe the same as you. Thanks, Manny. The Republicans in power in Congress did this like resolution. It was like a symbolic resolution saying that they were against communism and socialism, right? It was like this, and then sort of course, it's all economics, exactly tomorrow. And then suddenly, all these Democrats like Hakeem Jeffries and all that, they sign onto the bill, right? And they said, and they're like, oh yeah, we're against socialism too. Don't, don't. And the reason they did that is because this is before Trump met Zoran Mandami. They were worried that when Trump met Mandami, Trump was going to expose him and come out and go, you're a communist, you're a socialist, and then they would all be tarnished with that thing. That's why they panicked before the meeting. But instead, they looked foolish, and they looked foolish because Trump didn't do any of that. And instead, Trump said, which again, you got to take Trump with a grain of salt. I'm not saying Trump. I don't believe Trump when he said it, but what Trump said is exactly what Democrats should have been saying the whole time. Trump said, I will barrack for Zoran Mandami to do well in New York. I will support Zoran Mandami to do well in New York because if he does well in New York, he does well for the rest of the country, right? So I will support him so he does well. Why couldn't the Democrats say that? Like, why couldn't the Democrats just go, Zoran Mandami and me do not have the same policy prescriptions. We believe in different ways to get things. However, he's a Democrat and he's the mayor of New York, and we want him to do really well, and we will support him to make sure that he does do really well. How is that a bad thing to say, right? Look, they're so scared of even saying that, right? So instead, they thought that Trump was going to do this and Trump was going to. I'm sure that there were Democrats like comms people and strategists going, okay, we need to distance ourselves from Zoran coming into the midterms. How can we some did support him, some didn't. Yeah, exactly, Senator. I'm talking about the ones who didn't. And even like King Jeffries and stuff like that. And, even when he did, who knows, Trump would say nicer things about Mamdani than Schumer. Yeah, exactly. He did say nice. Now, of course, with Trump, you never know if it's BS or there's obviously 100 other things going on. But the fact that Trump would get away with that and say that, and the Democrat, so you have now a juxtaposed position where Trump has said nicer things about Zoran Mandami than some of the Democrats have, right? Because Trump understands the electorate better. He has a better antenna than Democrats do, right? He has a much better political skills than Democrats do. In my opinion, I think Trump could see the writing on the wall. People do not care about labels anymore, right? They don't care whether you call yourself a social democrat, a democratic socialist, a libertarian, a conservative. They want policies that they think is going to help them. And especially in a day and age where everybody uses the word Nazi, socialist, communist, those words get thrown around 100 times a day. Trump called, right, Joe Manchin a communist, right? He called Liz Cheney a communist. Liz Cheney a communist, right? So Trump calling someone a communist doesn't mean anything because he calls all Democrats communists. So that never was going to work, right? Because people are not thinking like that. Also, I think people are smart enough to know that Zoran Mandami wasn't a communist, right? So I think there's that as well. I think Trump knew it wasn't working, and because he knew it wasn't working, he stopped using it, right? Because don't forget, he tried the whole Joe Biden is a communist for about 2 months leading up to the elections, and nobody was buying it, so he stopped using it, right? Trump can't use the word communist because he's overused the word, right? So you got to be careful. You got to be careful when you overuse a word. This is why sometimes on the right, I don't use the word Nazi a lot because I don't want to use the word Nazi so much that eventually everyone gets called a Nazi and everyone gets called a communist, and suddenly the word means nothing anymore. It just becomes an hominem attack, right? And that for me is not as powerful. If you're more selective about using that word and you only use that word when it really means something, then I think it becomes a more powerful word, right? And I think Trump, to his own detriment, overused the word communist, overused the word radical leftist, and nobody takes it seriously anymore, right? Because he says it so much. Again, if you call Liz Cheney a communist and Joe Manchin, most people, even Republicans, would be like, okay, calm your farm there a little bit there. That's going a little bit too far. So I think from that point of view, Democrats need to, the Democrat establishment, again, I'm not saying that Democrats should become socialists, but why can't you just say you're going to support him and you're going to help him to make New York a better place? I just don't see the downside of that. And the idea, again, I don't think, a couple of things. One is Zoran Mandami can't run for president, right? Zoran Mandami is never going to be like, the leader of the Democratic Party because Zoran Mandami will, because there's a lot, calm your farm, yeah. So a lot of people um, in the Democratic Party, it's a big tent party. You have like 350 million people, but isn't normalizing all of this one of the strategies for the authoritarian? Yeah, I do think that, Tamara. I do think that, yeah. But you can also, Tamara, I think you can also normalize things that also work, that you normalize things to a degree, Tamara, that it is bad. I think a lot of normalization is bad, but it can also help the opposition to some degree. Let me give, like for example, Tamara, if someone was called a socialist or a communist 10, 15 years ago, before everybody was like, before it was used all the time, it could have been a lot more effective against Zoran Mandami, right? 10, 15 years ago, because that word wasn't used all the time. So when someone came out, if a president came out 15 years ago and said, that guy Zoran Mandami is a communist, everyone would have gone, whoa, because it wouldn't have been something that was used, but because the shock value. But because Trump himself has made words no longer have any meaning by overusing those words, by calling everyone communist or terrorist or whatever, nobody takes them seriously, including his own side. So, in a sense, Trump undervalued his own word by using it too much. The other thing is that he's done is that he's made it easier for Democratic candidates to not have to have a past that isn't perfect and also now be okay. So what I'm talking about is you have you have, I think his name, Graham Plattner in one of the states. He's a Democrat. He's a very progressive Democrat. He had a tattoo of not a swastika, it was like a skull and bone, but we found out later that it had some sort of Nazi thing. He got it when he was in the Marines. Now, that if that had happened 10, 15 years ago, he would be gone. But because we're all now playing in the Trump world, the Trump multi-universe, right? He can now get away with it, right? Because what Trump did is he didn't just normalize it for his own party, he's normalized it for everybody. But so it's now, there was during the recent elections, I can't remember his names, but there was a Democrat, a guy who had sent out like horrible text messages about fantasizing about his opposition being killed, right? Again, he won. The person who supported him, the governor, also won. Now, again, that person would not have survived 10 years ago. So he's not just normalizing the Overton window, right, for what is acceptable in politics is now much wider, but it's not just much wider for Republicans, it's become much wider for also for Democrats. And you can now I don't know how old you are, Tamara, but I remember the first election I really got into in America was 2024 elections. And there was a Democrat in the primaries called Howard Dean, right? And he was coming first. He was one of the most progressives. And he lost because during one of his rallies, he did like this screech. He went, ah, like, right. And that was it. Because he elevated his voice, he lost the primary. He didn't say anything bad. He didn't do anything bad. It was like the bar was here, right? If you had, Ronald Reagan was my first vote. Oh, right. Okay. Well, there you go. Yeah. But yeah, so you would remember the Howard Dean thing where the bar back then for if you smoke marijuana, you don't, it was so low. It was probably too low. I still feel agree. Yeah, I do agree, Marnie. I do agree that Democrats do definitely get graded on a. It's much easier for Trump to get away, but I have noticed that is now coming over to the Democratic side more so than it used to. I am noticing that, yeah, and I think these couple elections and Graham Plattner and all these things, we're starting to see that you can get away now more for Democrats than you can. So calling Zora Mandami a communist, although effective 10, 15 years ago, look, part of this is not just about Donald Trump. Part of this is that people live in echo chambers. So when Howard Dean did that screech, everybody knew about it, whether you're left wing, right wing, whatever, because everyone was watching the same news for the most part. Now, has Zora had Howard Dean did that screech, most of it, first of all, it's such a mild thing these days, it would never have made the news. But even if it did, only half the country would have heard about it. So again, and so again, because people aren't engaged in news as much as they used to be, people can get away with a lot more these days. People don't, people also, I think because a lot of politicians these days are on social media, we get to see them more as human beings, right? And not just as these celebrities on 60 Minutes. We get to see them in their own homes. And when you get to see people as human beings, you're more forgiving of those people. And a lot of the things that you see on social media is, oh, yeah, I stuffed up, I did wrong, I'm so sorry. And everyone goes, no, we're all human. There's much more of that these days. There's much more of, and in some ways, people actually are attracted to authenticity more than they used to be. And if you admit to making mistakes, you come across as more authentic because what happens is, Tamara, right, when I was a kid, every home was glued to Dan Rather at 6 foot, and we all, exactly, Tamara, yeah. Now, nobody's watching the same news, especially if you're under the age of 50 or even 60, right? So again, you can get away. Also, when you watch online, if you're following someone online, you're only probably following someone that likes your politics. So you're not hearing what's happening on the other side. So again, I think it's, because that, but I think on the other hand, a lot of these podcasters and things, I think they're pretty good because we get to hear politicians talk for, an hour and 2 hours, 3 hours, I think is too much, but we get to hear that more about what they believe in. And for that reason, I think, in some ways, see, this is why I need to listen to and read what you write as you make them things I wouldn't think of. Thanks, Joe. Oh, thanks, Marnie. Appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that a lot has changed on how we digest news, which comes across in how much politicians can get away with what they do. So even with like the Epstein files, right? So if you look at the Epstein files, I've been reading a lot of the stuff that's been coming out, like a lot of the stuff that got released. And what I'm seeing is in a lot of the Epstein files is a lot of people right, had relationships with Epstein. And I'm not even talking about the pedophilia stuff or all the sex trafficking stuff. I'm not even talking about that. A lot of the emails that have been leaked are just normal, like emails between Epstein and politicians or people like Larry Summers at Harvard University. They're just people in the elites. And they're not talking about doing anything illegal, right? They're not talking about pedophilia. They're not talking about um, anything. But what they are talking about a lot is it is amazing how there is two worlds happening, right? There is the world that they present on media to everyone, and then the private world. And nothing encapsulates this more to me than when Tucker Carlson, when he was on Fox News, he would always talk about how bad Hunter Biden was. Hunter Biden is evil. Hunter Biden's the worst person in the world, all this sort of stuff. And then it gets leaked that he was privately sending emails to Hunter Biden asking him for advice on where to send his kids to school, right? So think about that. For us, we're seeing a Fox News person talk about how much he hates a particular person, but behind the scenes, he's asking advice on where to send his kids. This is what I'm seeing from this is a lot of the stuff that to me, everyone wants to know the pedophilia stuff. Everyone wants to know, of course, we all do, because that's the worst part of it. But there's a part that's been missed that can also, is not illegal, but can also open our eyes up into what's actually happening in this world. On the one hand, you had people criticizing Epstein and publicly saying they didn't want anything to do with him, but privately, they were emailing each other, texting each other, not about illegal things, but they were asking him for money to fund their case, like to fund them in their as a politician. They were asking advice on how to pick up women, not underage women, like older, like actual women. The conversation with Larry Summers, to me, encapsulates so much of this world, right? On the one hand, Larry Summers was criticizing Epstein all the time, but privately, he was emailing him, asking him advice on how to pick up a girl, not a girl, someone who who was at his university. It wasn't someone that he was teaching, but it was someone that he was mentoring. Now, this person was in their 20s, right? But and then Epstein says you should leverage your position as a leader at Harvard University to get this girl to like you and what. So basically, they're talking about how to get women. I have to go, Joe, but thanks for the time. Bye. Thank you, Kimmy. Thank you so much. So they were talking about leveraging, like having discussions about how to pick up women and using their power to pick up women, right? And that to me is exactly, Sandra. It's gross, and that is one of the things that I hope doesn't get missed, because if you just focus on, like, of course, it's the bad stuff. How about that Democratic? Yes, the Stacey Plackett. That was the one I was talking about as well. Yeah, yeah. She was he was giving her advice during when she was talking to Michael Cohen in the Senate, and behind the scenes, Epstein is telling her to ask these questions. Like this now, again, there's nothing illegal here. There's nothing about sex trafficking, nothing about underage girls, but the relationship that people had, that they respected his political opinion. They asked for his advice on how to pick up women. It's a weird world, right? And it makes you think of why Donald Trump would have had a great relationship, right, with Epstein. Because remember, he have Epstein talking to Larry Summers about how to pick up women and use your power to pick up women. Now, go back to Donald Trump in 2016 when that grab him by the pussy tape came out. Now, remember what he said there. He said, when you're rich, when you're famous, you can just do whatever you want. you can and they you can, you know what I mean? So he prefaced that statement with when you're rich and when you're famous. That is exactly the conversations you will hear Larry Summers and Epstein talking about. It's all about how to pick up women, forget the underage girls, how to pick up women because you're powerful and rich. So it's like you have a bunch of nerds, right? It's like that movie. Do you remember that movie Revenge of the Nerds from the 1980s, right? This is what I think when I think of a lot of these people like Bill Gates, Larry Summers, Peter Thiel, you know, a lot of these Elon Musk, they love taking advantage. These people would have had no attention from women when they were teenagers, right? And they only started getting attention from women when they became famous and rich. And a lot of the people around Epstein were like these type of people. They were people who, on their own, if they were a plumber, if they just had a normal job, they could never get a woman. But Epstein is saying to these people, hey, you know, you're rich, you're famous, you're the head of Harvard, right? You should use that, leverage that to pick up women, right? And so Trump, you can see how Trump was involved in this world where Trump basically in that tape said, if you're rich, if you're powerful, you can do whatever you want. They all think the same. I mean, I want to give you another example, which is maybe milder and one that a lot of people don't talk about these days is Jerry Seinfeld, right? Like I'm a big fan of Jerry Seinfeld. I used to love his shows in Australia. But Jerry Seinfeld, right, in the early 90s he was in his 30s. I think he was in his late 30s, and he was walking through Central Park and he came across a 17-year-old girl who was still in high school, right? And he tried to pick her up. And he did pick her up. And they ended up dating. And now he copped a little bit of criticism for it, but it was pretty much pretty normal. Like back then, it wasn't considered a big thing. Now think about it. Would that 17-year-old schoolgirl had wanted to date Jerry Seinfeld if he wasn't Jerry Seinfeld? No chance in hell, right? No chance in hell that 17-year-old would have been dating a 38-year-old if it wasn't Jerry Seinfeld. So again, you see now again, none of this is illegal. But you see this thing of power, men with power, fame, taking advantage of that, right? To get women who would not normally be interested in them or to manipulate those people by using their fame to like them. So I just think it's one of the interesting things about the whole Epstein thing that I hope doesn't get lost here is that not all of it was illegal. Not all of it was about children. And a lot of it was about rich, powerful men who, you know, who in public criticized each other, but privately were having a friendship, right? So, it's just goes to show that there are two worlds going on out there. Yeah. And I'm not talking about the deep state. I think that's all bullshit, but it's not about the deep state. It can be anybody in power. It could be Jerry Simon. It could be a comedian. It could be a actor. It could be anybody. If you take advantage of a 17 or 18-year-old girl even, because you're in your 30s or 40s, I don't think that's a good thing. And who knows where that could lead to. If you take advantage of a 17 or 18-year-old girl, what is next time a 16 or 15, where does it end? And that's what I think about with that. So it did show me that a little bit like that. But I think a lot of that stuff, I mean, if I was to be perfectly honest, I don't think the rest of the Epstein files that have come out, I don't think we're going to see it's illegal. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know tomorrow if it's illegal. I don't know. I don't know which part is illegal. I mean, asking someone to help you pick up a woman wouldn't be illegal. But like, I don't know, like, is the age of consent in America? I thought the age of consent was 18. But then again, I think it's different state by state. So I don't know what it would be in New York, but I'm assuming, how about Megyn Kelly? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Megyn Kelly. Yeah. But this is the thing, Marnie. This is the thing, right? They try to, basically, how can I say? They try to rehabilitate No, Jerry Seinfeld dating. Oh, 17. Yeah. Yeah. So what is the age of consent in New York? Is it 18? Like how did he get away with that? I don't understand how he got away with that. Um, is it because he said he never slept with her until he was 18? Maybe that's how he got away. They dated, but he never slept with her until he was 18. Maybe that's what it was. But whatever it was, it's weird to feel okay about someone sleeping with you because of your dollars. Do you have any? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, imagine, like, this is the thing. Paolo, you're exactly right. Why would you want, forget the fact, okay, let's look at it from the guy's perspective, right? How much, if you're a guy and I'm a guy, right? If if I thought a girl was only with me because she thought I was famous or I was rich, I would think, well, wait a sec. I'm going to have, I'm going to be intimate with someone who doesn't want to be intimate with me, but who's only intimate with me because of that. I wouldn't be attracted to that, but I would want to be with that person, right? I would want to be with someone who wants to be with me because they like me as a person and they're physically attracted to me. I don't want to be someone who's only attracted to me because of the money. I mean, how that would be like a turn off for me. Like that would like that's why I've never understood guys who go to prostitutes. Like I'm not against prostitution if that's but I'm just saying like if someone's only sleeping with you for monetary reasons, that doesn't say much about you. But it shouldn't be a turn on for you. That should be like a turn off. Anyway, everyone's into their own thing. But I just think it's a weird. Why would you want that? Why would you want to convince someone to sleep with you? And I'm not innocent in all, but dating a 17-year-old and exposure can be different things. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And it depends on how old you are. Now, growing up in Australia in like the 90s and stuff, when I was in my 20s, it wasn't unusual for a 21-year-old guy to date a 17-year-old. That was like, no one even thought anything bad about that, right? So but I think the difference is that there wasn't like a power dynamics, right? The 21-year-old wasn't like, yes, it's all mindset as with prostitution, not about feelings. Yeah, it's like for me, it's about the power structure. Yeah, you get someone in their 30s, they're your boss, right? And all this sort of stuff, and they take advantage of that. I think that's when it gets really really bad, right? Um, but yeah, but I just think I actually don't think that any of the release. Let's just assume that all the Epstein files come out, right? Assume they do eventually. I actually got to say, I don't think we're going to find out that Trump was with underage girls. I actually don't think that's what's going to happen. Um, and the reason I don't think that is because the none of the women who so far have come out on TV, they've all said they never saw him do anything bad. And Virginia Giuffre said she didn't do anything bad. And I think there could be other motivations. Now, the first question you would ask yourself is, why did he put Ghislaine Maxwell into a minimum security prison with no walls? Okay, so and why didn't he release the files if he has nothing to hide? I think what he has to hide is my husband is 7 years younger than me, but I could not be physically attracted to someone that could be my child. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly, Marnie. Oh, Arnie's a cougar. No, I'm joking. No. But yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I don't think the age difference makes much difference. If you're both of age, I don't think it makes any difference. A friend of mine, when I was in my 30s, was dating a woman who was 20 years older, and they were together for a long time. Yeah, yeah. And I think that's great, money. I think that's great. Good for you. Good for you. But yeah. But what was I saying? Yeah. So I don't actually think it's going to be. And the reason is, I think there's other reasons. I think we're going to find out other things in the Epstein files. I think a lot of the stuff that I've read and I've seen and I've heard other people who've seen stuff in there is a lot of it's going to be embarrassing things about Donald Trump, right? Has to be 8 years younger to be. Sorry, is it 8 years? Sorry, Marnie. I don't know. In Australia, it's 7, so it's probably like it's a cultural thing. In Australia, it's 7. I had no idea it was 8 in America. Yeah. So here's the thing: does having money and power have a direct correlation with dating becoming exploitation? Yeah, it's interesting, Tamara, because there's no doubt about it. Like, here's the thing, right? I mean, if you're, I mean, you could be attracted to, say, if you're a woman going on a date and you want to have children and you don't want, you want to be a stay at home mum, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, then you would want to have a husband who has enough money to look after the family. It's all good jokes. You would want to have someone to look after. So you can certainly see why someone would want to be with someone who's financially stable, right? Um, so I think you could be attracted to someone as like an as like a complete, like a holistic thing. Like, it could be you're attracted to their personality, their looks, and also that they're financially stable. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think it becomes exploitative when the money becomes the number one factor. When money is not just tied up with a whole bunch of other things. It's like, wow, I found myself someone who is very attractive, who has a great personality, and it's a bonus they have money. Like, wow, yeah, that would be a bonus, right? Of course it would be. That would be a positive. But if the number one thing is, well, I only care about the money and I'm not really that attracted to them, but they're kind of okay. And I kind of, their personality, but that's when I think it becomes a problem. And yeah, but again, if, it also depends on the person. Like, if someone, if a woman is old enough and that's her thing is like, I don't want to, if you're someone who's like, let's just say it's a guy, let's say you're a guy who's a gigolo and your whole thing is, I want to marry a rich woman and that's all I care about, then I guess he wants to be exploited because he's also, it's a complex thing. You know what I mean? I don't think it's saying, Kissinger is saying that even if he was with underage girls, it won't bring him down. The felony conviction with Stormy Daniels didn't do much. Yeah. This is the thing, Linda, because what I read, I've read way too much of all the emails, but I've read a lot. I've read Virginia Giuffre's book. I've heard all the testimony from the women, and if you read the emails, there was a lot of emails between Michael Wolff, right, the journalist, and Jeffrey Epstein, uh, and there's a lot of stuff in there that you probably would have read in the news that says things like, "You should bring Trump down." And if you read those emails just by themselves, they can seem like, oh, what's going on? But when you read the whole trail of the emails, he's talking about, they're talking about things 10, 15 years ago. This is the interesting thing about, right? You know how we were talking before about how Trump has normalized everything, where the bar is so high now to, like, to get kicked out of politics? Well, a lot of the things that Epstein were talking about going after Trump about were things that back then he would have been kicked out with, right? So, for example, at one stage they're talking about how Trump was with Stormy Daniels. They're talking about how Trump was like was with Epstein. So one of the things Epstein said, he said, how would people think about Trump? Right, this is years before he got elected. What would people think about Trump if they found out that, because what happened is that Epstein was dating a girl for 2 years, and then this is his words. He said he gave her to Trump, right, and then Trump dated her for a while, right? Now, now, years ago, he's saying that would have, that if that gets out, if Trump decides to run for election, that would be the end of his politics. They're talking about things that that we already know about Trump now, and none of it got him kicked out, right? So this is the thing that you need to look at this on foot. You need to look at this stuff. You have to take your bias hat off, right? And you have to look at it through just pure, like, take politics away from it. And what you're seeing is that was thinking Epstein, because his relationship had diminished with Trump, he wanted to get dirt, and Michael Wolff, they wanted to get dirt on Trump. But the stuff that they were talking about back then wasn't illegal. It was stuff, it was gross things. Stormy Daniels, sharing girls, threesomes, sending birthday cards. Like, Trump sent a birthday card Trump sent to Epstein. That was 100% true. Now, Donald Trump was very embarrassed by that birthday card that he that sorry, that he tried to sue the Wall Street Journal, but actually pulled away from it, right? But this is what I mean, right? This is what I mean by, if we're just, I think a lot of people are thinking is that we're going to find that Trump was against releasing the Epstein files because of underage girls or trafficking. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I'm not saying 100%. I don't know for sure, but if you actually read all the emails and you talk to all the people who have been involved in this, and you talk to the lawyer who was involved, who's representing the girls, she's seen a lot of the files, and she said the biggest surprise to her. That's interesting that the Overton window has moved so far that the Vol thinks is, yeah, yeah, that's right, yeah, exactly. So exactly right. So a lot of the things that they thought they were going to get Trump about were things that in the future did come out, but no, but he still got elected. So that's the perspective you have to put a lot of those emails in. The other thing is Steve Bannon had a very close relationship with with Epstein during that period. Even though he's such a pedo, but I think his dementia getting what? Yeah, yeah. I don't, he could be a pedo, but I don't think these Epstein files are gonna convict him as being a pedo. I think Trump. I think we're going to find out very embarrassing things about Trump and his sexual plights. I think we're going to find out things like the birthday cards, relationships. I think we're going to find out that Trump knew about what Epstein was doing, but turned a blind eye to it, which I think is probably one of the worst things that about this, is that if you know that Epstein was doing this stuff, he was trafficking girls, underage girls. If you knew this and you kept quiet about it, right? That's pretty bad, right? That is a pretty awful thing to do. Now, the thing is, in America, that's not illegal. It's not illegal to not go to the police if you can think someone's a pedophile, unless you're like a police officer, right? Obviously, or a doctor, or I think a school. There's certain jobs in America where you're mandated to tell that, but a real estate agent or a president or a reality TV star don't fall under those things, right? So there's nothing legal that's going to happen to Trump. I'm probably 90%. I'm 90% think that none of the Epstein files are going to make him out to be a pedophile, and I'm 90% that is nothing illegal in there, right? I think Trump reported that Epstein offered Bannon one of his properties to take his wife to. Yeah, exactly. And Dave, that's exactly right. We're going to find gross things about rich people. Yes, Bannon's part of it, and they are Russian. We're going to find out that rich people looking after his shop, exploiting women, right, taking advantage of women, and we're going to find that it's quite widespread, right? And a lot of these people might not have anything to do with pedophilia and might have nothing to do with the trafficking. I think they might be two separate things, right? So, but I do think these people definitely knew that he was involved in this, because a lot of their relationships were happening after he was convicted. Women are objects, not human possessions. Discussing, I think that's what we'll find. Just a bunch. Yeah, exactly, Sandra. I 100% agree. We're going to find out that these men And by the way, there are some women in there. The women didn't participate in any of this, but they laughed a lot. They laughed around. They knew about it, and they thought it was all a big joke. They were like, like that. It was mostly men. But Ghislaine Maxwell was a woman. So you will find, of course, you've got that, the senator from the Democratic Party who was taking, who was going. It's going to be all over. I don't care if Dems or Republicans need to go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Now I will say that the lawyer, the lawyer of the women who got accused, she did say that there are men in there, not Trump, but there are men in there who should have been prosecuted or at least investigated further. And so I think we will find out that there are men in there who might end up becoming investigated, right? Because I trust her judgment, because she could have gone out there and said, Trump did this, Trump did that, because she's a Democrat, right? But she's being honest about it. And she said, look, I haven't seen anything Trump did bad, like in terms of illegal. But at the same time, she said, I have seen things that rich and powerful men maybe should be investigated for. Now, here's the other thing about Trump. What kind of relationship do these men have to Trump? We do know that Trump looks after, right, and cares about other men who have done things like he has. I'm not talking about illegal things, but done things like he has. For example, Larry Summers, right? Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo is a Democrat, right? But when Andrew Cuomo had all these sexual harassment things against him, Democrats went, we don't want anything to do with him. Trump went, I feel sorry for him. David, MAGA voters have given Dump a free pass on sexual harassment, Access Hollywood. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly right, David. Yeah, I know. And this is the thing. The the benchmark, whatever you see in the files, right, wherever we find out about Trump in the files, 15, 20 years ago would have killed a politician's career. But now, what we're about to see in the files is probably something that we already know about Trump. We already knew he already probably do it, or it's going to be something embarrassing like another birthday card. Now he's trying to go after people in Congress. It's crazy. Yeah, exactly. And, going after just Democrats is crazy. But I guess the reason I'm saying this is I don't want Democrats, and I'm not talking about us, but I don't want Democrats to overplay their hands and say that Trump is a pedophile. I'm talking about people in the media and stuff like that, because if the files come out and he's not a Democrat and he's not a pedophile, that could actually that could work against us, right? Because you know what's going to happen? They're going to say they called Trump a pedophile. They said he did this and that, and now we find out he did nothing wrong. So we need to be careful that we don't overreach on this pedophile thing with Trump, because that could work in his favor. So I'm always very careful, because the other thing is there's enough about Trump that is awful that even if he isn't a pedophile, he's still a disgusting human being, right? He got found liable sexual assault, right? One of the Epstein women said that not one of the Epstein women, a woman who was a model said that she went to visit Epstein years ago. She was not underage, and then Trump fondled her, and and then she went to the police. So he has done sexual harassment. He's found liable sexual assault, right? So he's already crossed the line. He doesn't have to be a pedophile, right? So he might be a pedophile, but he doesn't have to be a pedophile to be a bad person. I don't want us to set the benchmark as he's a pedophile, but if he's not a pedophile, he's a good person, right? And that's what worries me about this whole pedophile thing. Because if we get too caught up in just being a pedophile and not all the other stuff, it's going to be like, well, I told you so, he's not a pedophile. So yeah. So for me, I think a lot of the file things is gonna be about Trump doing embarrassing things, just to go over it again. Maybe some more Christmas cards. Um, uh, I think he's done tons of stuff. Yeah, yeah. I just think in terms of the Epstein files, there could be stuff that he's done in terms of pedophilia outside of the Epstein files. But I think in terms of the Epstein files, I don't think so. I can't. It doesn't make. Yeah, there's too many people who are Democrats and on our side who have seen too much of the Epstein files and haven't seen that. Mate, that actually worries me too, Joe. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It worries me. Yeah. So sometimes when I think I think it's very easy when you hate someone as much as Trump, and I hate Trump as well, but maybe because I'm an Australian, I have a little bit more distance, right? Sometimes he's hiding something big, maybe protecting donors. Yeah, exactly. Dave, exactly. It doesn't have, this is the thing. Don't all I think everyone wants to think it's a pedophilia because it's pedophilia. It's the end of Trump. There's no doubt about it. You can get out of sexual assault. He can get out of libel, sexual assault. He can get out everything. But if we find out he's a pedophile, that is 100% the end of Trump. And I think everybody knows that. So some people are pinning their hopes on that because that's the one that's going to get him. But you got to follow the evidence. And the evidence isn't there for that. And so I say that not as to defend Trump, as to protect us from overreaching and then giving him something to come back at us with. They called me a pedophile. Where's the evidence? You know, it reminds me of a couple of months ago when Trump disappeared for a couple of days. Remember that he disappeared for a couple of days? And people were saying, oh, I think Trump is dead. I think he's on his deathbed. Remember that? And then and then we find out he comes back. He's just he's still unhealthy, but he's just a normal Trump. And then JD Vance does this tweet. And in this tweet, JD Vance says, if you listen to the people who told you Trump was about to die, that's why he went missing for a couple of days, right? Then maybe you should. So again, if you overreach, it can come back to you. So I always think it's best just to stick with what we know, and then because there is so much there to get Trump on without going all the way, and and then it can't come back to you. Yeah, follow the money. I think the other reason, Donna, the other thing is, and I think Paolo was saying that as well, and Dave from California, is that he could be protecting a lot of rich, powerful friends, right? A lot of these rich, powerful friends might have done. Michael Cohen, his former lawyer, doesn't believe that he will find pedophile-related stuff. Trump is the false. Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah, yeah, exactly. If you listen to people, right? If you listen to people who don't like Trump, but you have a lot of inside information. Like I didn't know about Michael Cohen, but I know a lot of the lawyers, and these are not, and they're saying you're not going to find pedo stuff in there. You should probably believe that, yeah, and push back from that a little bit, and then concentrate on the other stuff, yeah. So he doesn't get away with it. He doesn't get away with the stuff that's already in there. So what I'm saying is, I think he could be protecting a lot of powerful people, the same way Trump protected Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo got Andrew Cuomo. A lot of people, when he was sexual allegations against him, and the Democratic Party pushed him astray. Trump came to his defense. Why did he come to his defense? Because he sees in Andrew Cuomo himself someone who has power, someone who is famous, and he saw a woman he liked, and he decided, like he said, grab them by the. When you're rich and famous, you can do whatever you want, and he saw that in Andrew Cuomo, and so he protects people, right? He protects people who remind him of himself, rich, powerful people who harass women, right? And so I think that could be some of the stuff that's going on here is that we're going to find out there are people who have financial ties to Trump, maybe people who've contributed to his super PAC, who've given him money before, could be a business deal, could be real estate, could be whatever it is. And he knows they've been the Epstein files have maybe looked at them, and he's protecting those people. And by protecting those people, he's protecting his own interests. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Trump was a pedophile himself, right? So don't go for the one that you want to hear. because that's the one that's going to kill him. Democrats need new leaders. Thank you, Joe, GN, or I guess good day. Catch you next time. Thanks, Sandra. Really appreciate that. But yeah, that's pretty much what it is today. But before I go, I will say one more thing. I will talk about, I want to talk about Candace Owens. And the reason I want to talk about Candace Owens is because there's a lot of crazy stuff going on the right at the moment. And I've got to say, thank you, Joe, that Candace Owens has taken, like, sometimes occasionally I like to do a sanity check on what's going on the right. And the sanity check I just recently did was on Candace Owens. I went and checked her, and thanks, Tamara. And Candace Owens has now been tweeting. Now, of course, Candace Owens was saying that Emmanuel Macron's wife was born a man, right? With no evidence. Thanks, John. With no evidence, Emmanuel Macron's wife was born a man. This is just crazy. She has a massive audience, by the way. That's why I talk about. If she had an audience of 5,000 people, I wouldn't care, right? So she says batshit. I don't know whether she's a grifter. I don't know whether she believes it. Whatever it is, she's still putting up. So she basically says, Emmanuel Macron's wife, they're now suing her, right? So you would think that you're now being sued, right? Instead of, you think, I'm just not going to talk about it and I'm going to see how but instead, she takes it one step further and she says now that the Macrons she now has advice that the Macrons, right? Emmanuel Macron, so Emmanuel Macron, the president of the United States, wife, right? Candace Owens has been Macron's wife. Yeah. Candace Owens has been saying for months that she has proof that she was born a man. Yeah. Basically saying that the president of France's wife was born a man and she has proof of that. It's all BS, but she believes it and she's been going on about it for years, Tamara. And it is funny. It's funny. But, so Emmanuel Macron, the president, and his wife are now suing Candace Owens for that lie, right? So, but as I said, instead of like going, France, yeah, instead of going, you know what, I better be careful here because I'm getting sued. She's now saying that Emmanuel Macron and his wife have hired a hitman to kill her. Yeah, hired a hitman to kill her. So just to recap, starts with Emmanuel Macron, the French president's wife, was born a man. They're suing her. And she's gone, you know what? Also, they're trying to kill me. Now she may be a cougar. Yes, right. Yeah. So what's going on? Like this is insanity, right? And then other people online with big accounts are going, I'm not sure if this is true, but if it's true, you know, thoughts and prayers. Like they're taking it like it's serious. Like, I'm not sure if this is true, but if it is, thoughts and prayers. She really thinks that Emmanuel Macron and his wife have hired a hitman to kill her because she said that her wife was because they're trying to cover up his wife was born a man. This is insanity. Again, please stop asking Australians to stop following American media and politics when you put this stuff in front of us. What are we supposed to do? We can't not look away from this craziness. This is one of America's biggest influences is now saying that the president of the United States wife is a man, and to hide this even further, they've hired a hitman. Like, it's crazy. Is the hitman a trans person? Nobody knows, right? So again, crazy stuff. But anyway, I have to go. It's been a bit of a long one today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. I thought I'd finish on that sort of light note of Candace Owens. Yeah. And she's probably not even the craziest person. Thank you so much, everyone. Thanks, Dave from California. Thank you, Marnie. Thanks, Tamara, for joining. Thanks, Paolo. Thank you, Tamara. Hopefully you come again. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, everybody. Really, Marnie, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Kimmy, if you're still there. Sandra, if you're still there. Donna, thank you so much. Thanks, guys. I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye. Yes, exactly.